step 7, we will be using parts B22, B25, B11, B7, and B24. Paints that we will be using in this step are LP62, LP75, LP48, LP60, LP5, Vallejo Air NATO Black, and Tamiya X11. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Ducati build, step number 7. This one, I was looking at the directions, and although it doesn't have a whole lot of parts, literally just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and some screws to hold everything together. So not a lot of parts, but some crazy masking. So I'm gonna go grab all the parts. I'm gonna cut them out and clean them up. And then we're gonna look at some of this masking and see if we're gonna mask it or try to hand brush it. But again, we have to pay some close attention to these areas here. So when you trim them off of the sprue, it'll leave a little nub that this little icon is telling you to make sure you remove. So we will go grab some parts, and I will be right back. All right, looks like we are working entirely off of the B sprue. So it says we need B25 and B22, which are the frame parts. So we're just going to cut those all out. And that's B11. And there is. And what I'm doing is I'm just trimming them not close yet, just so I can not have to worry about the sprue in my hand while I'm trying to get everything else done. So we also need B7, which is up here. B7, and then I believe B24. Well, I was wrong. I thought there was 2 of these, but there's only 1. So I'll grab you, and grab you. So again, we're just trying to make sure we trim these as clean as possible. And where we trim them, we go back in and make sure there's no residue that will either make the fit a problem or the appearance. So we'll go ahead and trim that up. And sometimes I like to trim them or clean them as I go, so I don't lose track of what I just clipped. All right, that's B24, which it says to paint that. What colors are we going to be needing this time? We're going to be needing LP5, which is a semi-gloss black. That's the frame color, the main color of the frame. There's also some different, there's an LP60 color, and then there's a mixed color with LP62 one part to LP75 one part. And I'll go over those when it's time. But yeah, we're gonna have some different colors going on here. So let's trim out part number B7. Try to get that flush. And then come and just clean up that little part that you just trimmed off. Make that smooth. I always like to run my thumb over, and then you can find where you missed, because it goes smooth, and then all of a sudden there's a little rough patch. I don't want to flat spot it, so that looks like it's going to be something to do with the forks coming through. That's supposed to be painted LP48, which again, I'll go over that when it's time. Lots of contact parts here where this has got to be cut. And so we'll get in there, cut that. Get that all cut. Go down to this one. Like I said, sometimes this helps me keep track of where I've cut it and what needs to be trimmed and cleaned up. Because if I cut it really close right off of the sprue, then I've got to go around and go, oh, there's a spot, there's a spot. So, is anybody expecting any cool modeling supplies or kits for Christmas? I am not really expecting anything because I didn't ask too much in the modeling world for stuff for Christmas, so I don't know if she'll surprise me. Or maybe I'll just get money and surprise myself. But if you're expecting anything, I'd love to see, leave a comment. Tell me what you're hoping Santa will bring you. I did pick up the new Tamiya, what is it, the new car. I'm trying to look around and see if I can see the box. It's the new 240Z, I think. I picked that up from Hobby Nut Models on Friday, and I think that's going to be my next video build. We have a contest coming up in Chattanooga in January, so I'm hoping to have this one done by that time and maybe start on the Nissan 240Z. I believe it's the 240Z. All right, so that's all clipped and clean. All right, I am going to finish getting this clipped up, and I'll spare you the pain of watching me do this, and I'll fast forward it so you can just see it done. Remember those little nubs that the directions said clean up? You know, right in here. Those little nubs. Make sure you trim those down or else they will not fit together. So, let me double check and make sure I got that one. And I did. So, total of 1, 2, oh, there's another piece here, B25, see? Sometimes I get in such a hurry, I don't really focus on what parts I need. So let's go find 25. I grabbed the wrong sprue. B25 is over here. All right, so let's just... Be careful when you're going cutting towards your finger. Don't apply too much pressure. Don't want to slip. All right, now all the parts are cut. So I will go grab all the paints we need, and we'll start looking at some of this stuff that we may actually have to mask off. At any rate, I know that all of these parts, the main color is LP5, which, like I said, is a semi-gloss black. So I will definitely get all of these parts painted up that color first before we mask. So I shall be back. All right, I think what I'm going to do to make this a little easier, and also because there's some seams involved, when you glue these two pieces together, there's going to be a little bit of a seam on all these areas. So if I paint them separately and do all this masking and then glue it together, there might be a little seam there that will not be that attractive, especially if it doesn't set up that right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this piece B25 to this piece B11, and then then add B22 to B11. And then I'm going to paint it all as one unit and then come back in and mask these areas. So already got the parts ready. We got B25 right here, and this is B11. So it says to glue this piece right here. You'll notice a hole right here and a peg right there, and a hole right here and a peg right there. So we've got our holes here, and we got our pegs here and here. So we're just going to add a little glue. A little dab there. Little dab there. Then we are going to grab this little bad boy, and we're going to glue it right on those little pegs. Let's just make sure they're on there. This is not yet. So it's on. So that'll glue up and set up. And for poops and giggles, I'm just going to run a little bead right along that edge just to reinforce it. So we'll let that set up for a minute. And then we're going to glue these two pieces together. And then I'll go to the airbrush booth and I'll paint all of that LP5, and then I'll paint this LP48, which that's got a notch in it. So let's go ahead and glue this bad boy to all its little points. So it's got some little pegs here. I'll go around and try to find the little pegs. There. Then we're just going to match it up. Pegs to holes, top to bottom. Come back here. And then, yeah, and then we're going to have to hold it. But then we're going to just run a bead of glue down in here. Make sure that's nice and tight. We're just going to hold it for a couple seconds while that glue sets up. ideally, I do the same thing here. The beauty about this glue is it melts the plastic together. So it just kind of seeps down inside the crack. So when you press it, it's like you're pressing both sides together, and then when it's melting, the glue is melting the plastic, and then the plastic's just going to join each other. And become one. But when I did that, I pressed too hard and I popped this one up here. So I'm going to go into here, underneath. I'm going to touch that line there. I'm going to push that together and get that gluing. So I'm going to go to the airbrush booth when this dries, and I'm going to shoot it all LP5, and I'll be back. All right, we got the frame all painted LP5, semi-gloss black. One of the things that I noticed about this was there's a seam right in here I tried to fill so that way it wouldn't be noticeable, but then I looked ahead in the directions and there's actually an instrument cluster that goes right in here, so you won't see that seam anyway. But I did fill the seam here, and I tried to fill the seam wherever it would be seen. Seen, yeah. So I used just the Tamiya cement, and when you pushed it together, it kind of created a filling itself, and then I just went and scraped and sanded till it was smooth and no seam. So now we're going to look at how to paint and mask the different areas that it calls for. It's calling for this section here to be that combination that we painted on the engine of 62, LP62 and LP75. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of that. I think I'm going to hand brush this part here. So I'm going to mask off most of this on both sides and then shoot this, all that color, and then come back and hand paint this little section here that's LP5 again. It's a little bit of trouble, but I think the results will be really good when it's all done. All right, we are going to try to mask this off as best as we can, and then hand paint the rest. So, like I said, this section right here has that titanium gold mixture that we mixed for the engine, and this is NATO black. So I'm going to just go ahead and mask. I'm going to hand brush most of this except for the gold. So I'm going to mask this big section off of here so that way I can shoot the whole front section that gold color, and then come back and hand paint and pick out the details. Following the guide in the directions as far as where to mask for the gold. So I'm more interested in protecting all back here. So, because I'll come back in and hand paint this area here.
guess I'll go try to shoot this and see how much trouble I get into.
All right, it is shot and it is ready to peel off the masking tape and see how much damage I did. Now, it's not gonna look perfect because like I said, we're gonna have to come back and we're gonna have to hand paint some of these areas and make it look perfect. But for the main part, we shouldn't have too much trouble. Some overspray in here. So I'll definitely have to come back in there and touch that part up. Something down in these cracks too. So yeah, definitely gonna have some touch up to do. But kind of expected that. Sometimes it's really hard with these crazy shapes to get a perfect mask job. I mean, that one looks pretty crisp. But even on this one, here, you can see down inside here, I got some paint residue, and along this edge here. So not as crisp as I want, but very easy to go back in and finish those two areas. So the last part of this step has us putting in this little piece that we painted, which is B7, and attaching the engine into the frame, which we are going to do real quick. I'm going to get the engine in and then go back and detail paint the section that I just masked off. So we're going to do this right here, B7. We're going to place that inside where it goes. So if you notice at the top, it has a little notch right there. And that notch, you look here, there's a notch in the tank right here. So we're just gonna, it says to line those up and slide down, and it should fit flush. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe down here, it's not meeting up. There we go. So it pops through the bottom and it sits flush on the top. So yeah, if you have any trouble doing it, just kind of flip it over and guide it down into its hole. Now the engine, it says to put the engine in with the orientation of that hose going forward. And we're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 1.2 by 4 millimeter screws to attach that engine to the chassis. So we are going to take this bad boy and it's going to fit. You see the holes? They just kind of slide right up and right there. And then we're going to get our handy dandy screwdriver again. Well, that was not the smartest thing because it decided it wanted to grab all of them. We will grab the right screws, which I believe are these ones, but this time I'm going to actually measure and make sure they are. And they are. So now we have the right screws. So now we're going to do this again. We're going to match these up, the holes with the holes. All right. And just like that, we have an engine in our frame. So I am going to attach part B24, which is also going to require a decal on it. Look, we've got a decal that's going to go on right here of B24, and it's going to go right on this case as well. So I'm going to slide this piece in just to see how it fits, and then we are going to step away so I can get the paints to detail paint this front section up here, and then put the decal on, and we will be ready for step 8. So I will see you in a bit. All right, time to do some brush and detail painting on the Ducati. The first part I'm going to tackle is this little section here that's between the gold part that we painted and the semi-gloss black frame. It calls for LP60, which is a NATO black, which is kind of like a flat black. So I'm not going to use Tamiya paints. I'm going to use Vallejo Model Air NATO black. I find that when I brush paint, the Vallejo Model Air really goes down well with fewer brush strokes, and it's easier to maintain. So I'm going to use this and paint those 2 sections on each side, and then we'll move on to some other painting so we can wrap up step 7. So I'm going to grab myself a handy little palette, one of my recycled bottle caps, water bottles. Going to get a good brush that I can get a pretty good tip on. I'm going to go ahead and take this out of the vise because I don't trust it, but it'll probably fall. So we are going to just going to paint this whole area and get where I masked badly. And NATO black, like I said, is kind of like a gray black, or a flat black. It kind of dries with a nice. It's gonna be a nice difference between the semi-gloss and the NATO. So again, it'll give just all these colors reacting with each other. Helps define the part even better. I'm trying to smooth out the paint, try to get as few brush strokes, just nice and steady. So that when it dries nice and smooth. And hopefully I can pull it off. I didn't want to go back in and have to mask all these areas out, which might be a little lazy, but trying to utilize just going to follow the contours of this part where it butts up to the frame. Follow along that. So I guess what it's probably replicating is probably like a plastic housing. And that's what the native black is going to help it replicate. And that part is done on that side. I don't know if it really shows much of a difference from the semi-gloss to the NATO black. I mean, it kind of does. You kind of get a different color going on there. So we are going to do the other side. I didn't glue that part on, so it just came back off. So we're going to touch down in here, get all the crevices. So that is done. So now I'm going to go pick up some LP5 and we'll see how this dries while I'm getting the LP5, because now we're going to touch up all the little areas up here that need to be LP5. All right, be right back. All right, now we are looking at doing the LP5, which, if you're looking straight down from where the gas tank would be, like that, it's showing that these up here have to be painted black, as well as this down here has to be painted black, and all the way around. And then it also shows kind of a side view of what needs to be painted black here. So it looks like it's just all around here, and these upper parts need to be painted LP5. So I will attempt to hand paint that and see how it goes. So we'll just get some LP5 going here. Got it straight out of the jar. And so I decided to stop it because it was going on too long and you didn't want to see me actually hand brush everything. So we've got everything painted. So we've got the LP5 and And the silver, we had to paint this little notch here. X11, which is a silver. And then all of this, following the guidelines of what needs to be painted. I picked out the bolts here. So I'm gonna do a little bit of a wash because there's some panel lines or some indicating edges. So I'm just gonna run a quick wash after that to wrap this step up. But there was one more piece to this that we needed to do. And so on this little piece right here, B24, there's a decal number 52 that needs to be placed on it. And I didn't glue it in the first place. It just kind of wrestles and rests up behind this frame. So I went and cut out decal 52, which was on the second decal sheet. And it was right there. And it is right here. Can't really see it. So I am going to get that decal ready for some water. Doesn't need a lot for just one little decal, so I'm just gonna put it in there, let it sit for a second, and get that ready. And then we are ready to move on to our next step, which will be step 8, which is attaching the chain. And it looks like part of the swing arm, I think. So I've done chains in the past, but like I was mentioning at the beginning of this video series, this chain is, well, it's the first that I've built from Tamiya that has 2 parts. So that way when it goes together, it has more dimension than some of the older chains used to be. So I'm kind of excited to try to build this and see what it's gonna come out as. So I'm going to pull this decal off of its water, pull it out. Let's sit here for a minute. And then I'm going to look at my decals or my instructions. And it goes just like that format, and it goes right into that space right here. Right there. So I'm going to just put some water down there. Well, because I didn't wash out my brush too well before. Good thing I noticed that. All right, so I'm just going to add some water onto the part. That'll help the decal kind of slide around. I'll pull that decal off, slide it, and grab it. And I'm going to put it right there where it goes. It goes right there. Now, I'm going to use my towel a little bit. Normally I'll use a Q-tip. Just make sure it sits where it's supposed to sit. Sometimes you have to jiggle it and wiggle it. So there, that is. So I'm gonna let that dry and then put that, attach it to the frame. And step 7 is, that just slides up in there and clamps down. So step number 7 is done. We have a chassis, we have a rear damper added to the frames, the engine is all locked in, and we are ready for a chain and a rear swing arm. So I will see you at the next video, and I appreciate you guys, everyone that has subscribed and liked and commented. It really helps me get better. So I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll see you next time.